want to make a few quick points on why this wasn't an insurrection, and also support Jack Smith on this point, on why he didn't charge Trump with insurrection. So 2 days before January 6th, Trump personally authorized the use of up to 20,000 National Guard's troops, okay? On January 5th, he put out a statement, and he said this on CNN's town hall. He told it to Caitlin Collins. He put out a statement: stay peaceful, remain peaceful, respect our law enforcement, and respect our Capitol Police.
Trump didn't actually tweet that. His chief of staff did.
Okay.
And Trump did not authorize 20,000 troops. In fact, to the opposite, his defense secretary, Chris Miller, published a memo on January 4th that explicitly said that no National Guard troops could provide any assistance whatsoever, including equipment or even intelligence, to the Capitol Police.
Well, I disagree, and you could listen to Kash Patel's testimony to the Colorado court.
Yeah, well, I'm not believing anything Kash Patel says, first of all. And secondly, I've got the document. I mean, the whole world has seen it. You know, Chris Miller's document saying, you know, National Guard, you may not show up, is absolutely unambiguous. And he was the Secretary of Defense.
That day, he was authorized. That day, they authorized up to 350 troops from the D.C. area, I believe.
Nope.
But prior to that day, okay. All right, so Kash Patel's a liar, I guess.
Yes,
we'll pin it
absolutely.
up.
Absolutely. Right. And like I said, I've got the memo. I've got the memo.
Lastly,
Kash Patel's also behind, you know, he's part of this whole 2,000 mules thing. I mean, you know, the lies. Well, anyway, back to you, Chad.
Kash Patel lied to the Colorado court. Why haven't they charged him with?
You'd have to ask the Colorado court. I have no idea.
Oh, okay. If he's such a liar, why haven't they charged him?
You know, I don't even know that he actually said that to the Colorado court, Chad. All I have is your assertion of it. But the fact of the matter is that the Secretary of Defense, working for Donald Trump, the acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, issued a memo, and I encourage you to look for this memo on the internet. You can easily find it. Issued a memo on January 4th saying there will be no participation by the National Guard in any defense of the Capitol. He just, in fact, I think I've got it here, and I'll read it to you. I mean, it's
okay. Well, again, then somebody ought to go put a set of leg shackles and handcuffs on Kash Patel for lying to the Colorado courts, because that's.
Well, I'm sure Kash Patel isn't the only one who's saying those kind of things.
Okay, and then the final piece, real quick.
Okay.
And I enjoyed talking with you. Nobody, including yourself, and I watched the sham cable show, the January 6th hearing. Not one time I heard you or anybody else mention Trump saying that we're going to go peacefully and patriotically let our voices be heard. Not once. I've never, in the past year, I've never heard you say that. And I've never heard MSNBC say that. And the January 6th committee never once showed that clip.
Here is the memo from Christopher Miller, the acting Secretary of Defense. It's dated January 4th, 2021. If you just plug in Chris Miller January 4th memo, you'll find it real quickly on the internet. Memorandum for Secretary of the Army, employment guidance. This memorandum responds to your January 4th memorandum regarding the District of Columbia request for National Guard support in response to planned demonstrations on January 6, 2021. You are authorized to approve the requested support subject to my guidance below and subject to consultation with the Attorney General as required by Executive Order 11485. So he says, you're authorized to do this. So that's probably what Kash Patel was saying. But with these caveats. Now, here are the bullet points. Without my subsequent personal authorization, the National Guard is not authorized the following. Number one, to be issued weapons, ammunition, bayonets, batons, or ballistic protection equipment such as helmets and body armor. So, number one, you've got to, if you're going to help the Capitol Police, you've got to do so basically naked. You got to do so in your street clothes. Number two, to interact physically with protesters except when necessary in self-defense or defense of others, consistent with the DNC-NG rules for the use of force. Number three, to employ any riot control agents. You may not control the riot at all. You may not use tear gas or anything like that. Number four, to share equipment with law enforcement agencies. You may not help the Capitol Police. Number five, to use intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets or to conduct ISR or incident awareness and assessment activities. In other words, you may not help the Capitol Police when they're under attack by providing them with any information at all. Number 6, I think I'm up to employ helicopters or any other air assets. You may not use your hardware. Number 7, to conduct searches, seizures, arrests, or other similar direct law enforcement activity. You may not help in any way in the form of what could be called law enforcement. And finally, to seek support from any non-DC National Guard units. And you may not even get help from, because you'll recall, you had the Republican governor of Maryland was trying to deploy his National Guard to Washington, D.C., and the Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, prevented it from happening. The memo says, in all these cases, the D.C. National Guard will remain under the operational and administrative command and control of the commanding general of the DCNG, who reports to the Secretary of Defense through the Secretary of the Army. In other words, to me. You may employ the DCNG Quick Reaction Force only as a last resort and in response to a request from an appropriate civil authority. So, there you go. I mean, I just read you the whole memo.
Okay, I think you're missing my point. My point was that Trump was of the mindset, and this is what we're getting back to, of the mindset of here, whether he was able to carry that out, whether that order was ever to be carried out or not. My point, and I'm trying to make it, is I'm trying to illustrate the mindset of this whole insurrection.
You mean when he said you got to fight like hell or you're not going to have a country anymore?
Well, let's go back and we can go through all the.
I'm not going to go through any of it, Chad. You've made your point. I've made my point. I'm going to move along. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick.
This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Health care is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom, and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate healthcare has convinced us that some people deserve healthcare and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us, or could ever keep us, from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different, inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest health care program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of health care. I believe this health care is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are health care. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer health care is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Blue numbers on my bedside clock tell I forgot to change the hour. This sets routines on haywire. Like a domestic goat staked to its circle of earth, I don't do well untethered. I have no hunger for the early dinner, become confused by the sound of children who seem out too late for a school night. They found an extra helping of daylight to romp around on new grass and can't contain themselves, strip off jackets, scatter like a rag of ponies. Whatever time says, their joy insists on springing forward. That is The Day After Daylight Savings by Margaret Hass. How do you like daylight savings? Is it your favorite? Is it your least favorite? Do you like springing forward? Do we wish we stayed back, fallen? Or do you wish we stayed forward? Curious about your view. This is Thom Hartmann Show. I'm Jefferson Smith sitting in. Call-in number here is 202-808-9925, 202-808-9925. I have a controversial view on daylight savings. In the show Veep, the bungling aide made a surprisingly impactful run for the U.S. Congress, spoiler alert, based largely on his view of dumping daylight savings. Daylight savings adopted because more people are awake in the later hours than the early hours, and during the winter months, it gets dark at 4 p.m. It feels really early. Certain farming states felt that and feel that's a little weird. What's your view? So that's the Veep view. And maybe it's a growing view, I don't know. Then there's my dad view. I think we may have my dad on for News with My Dad tomorrow. And his view is daylight savings all the time. Just save the daylight, spring forward and stay that way forever. I don't know if that works in every time zone. Where we live, it worked pretty well. It'd get dark it'd stay dark kind of late in the morning. But that's how it was in Spain when I visited. It didn't get light until like 9:30 in the morning or something. It was very strange. And he wants it all the time. Are you ready for my controversial view? Here's my controversial view. I'm fine with it. That's my controversial view. I'm fine with it. It's just fine. I think there's some decisions that were made years ago that I'm sure we should revisit. And teaser for a topic. I am interested in this idea of how we revisit old decisions. How we wrestle with democracy, not only for decisions we make now, but how we wrestle with the decisions of democracy made by previous generations. Some of those have been bad. Some of those should be revisited. Daylight savings, some people want to revisit. And my controversial view is, I'm fine with it. This is just fine. Like, it's mildly annoying to it's a little earlier a little earlier or later, I forget which it is, and my dog wants to eat at a different hour, and that's mildly annoying. And it's mildly fun in October when I get an extra hour of sleep. And it's, fine, I'm fine with it. That's ultimately. So it's hard to build a powerful political movement full of passion and donations and volunteers and signature gatherers over a platform of, I'm fine with it. It's just fine. But there might be some other things in our democracy that we're just fine with. That aren't that great, aren't that terrible. On average, a little bit better than otherwise. Just a little bit better. I'm fine that we drive on the right-hand side of the road. I'm fine with it. Could we drive on the left? Maybe, but I think I'd probably prefer the right. But I don't care, I'm fine with it. Any other things that we should build dispassionate movements around just because we're fine with it? Not because, hell no, we won't go. Not because we demand justice now. But just because, we're fine with it. It's going to be fine. Call number here is 202-808-9925. Here's a topic, though. Have you read about and heard about Solano County? Hat tip to the New York Times, hat tip to the Associated Press. The Solano County is a county in California, not too far outside San Francisco. And a company, Delaware Corporation, that started, I think, 7 years ago, that shared no information about who it was, started buying up plots. I think people have started to see the headlines about this at least, but it's interesting. We haven't gone into depth on it. Started buying up farmland. And just every year and paying above market. You know, all these folks who go to the same grocery store. It's a rural county outside a very urban center, San Francisco. And people who go to the same grocery store, go to the same church, are all getting these letters offering money for their homes and their farms and their land. These include people who've lived on the land, families who've lived on the land for multiple generations. And it's the buzz of the town. A lot of people are taking the deal. And Flannery Associates ended up gathering a plot of land that I think is bigger than the city of San Francisco. It's pretty big. But nobody knew who they were. They'd ask, and they'd say, and when asked, they'd say, "Oh, it's some investors who are interested in diversifying their portfolio and investing in farmland." And finally, after investigative journalism, thank you, investigative journalists, for this sort of stuff, they learned, no, that's not what was going on at all. That some of the richest people in the country, and therefore some of the richest people in the world, or I should actually add a step, some of the richest people in Silicon Valley, therefore some of the richest people in the country, therefore some of the richest people in the world, including Lorraine Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, including Mark Andreessen, the guy who did Netscape, included now as a big venture capitalist. He did Netscape, right? Now as a big venture capitalist. Reid Hoffman, the guy the founder of LinkedIn. These people were putting in big money, working with Goldman Sachs, and buying up all this land. And it turned out what they wanted to do was they want to build a new city. They want to build a new 400,000 person city. And I'm fascinated by this topic. And they didn't want to tell anybody because they didn't want people to try to stop them. And they didn't want people to jack up the prices. Like, hey, did you know all the rich people are trying to buy up all our land? You should triple the price. They wanted to keep the prices above market, but reasonable. And then it became public, and so they started calling themselves California Forever. And they became very public, and they started doing sort of a charm offensive around the town. Because it turns out that California Forever, the parent company of Flannery, and I'm wondering if there's any Californians who have a view on this. You don't have to be a Californian to have a view on it. Call in numbers 202-808-9925. But if by any chance you know anybody in Solano County, they're going to have a vote to make. Because they've got to get approval. And they started suing some of the farm owners. Some of the farm owners why are you suing me? Just because I don't want to sell my land to you. I like being a farm. I don't necessarily want it to be a subdivision or a housing development or some larger buildings. And the sales pitch to them, the sales pitch at first was, hey, it's just farmland. Just get extra money for your land and don't have to farm anymore. The sales pitch then later became, hey, we want to do a neat thing and build a city based on modern design principles, not the dumb design principles, the deregulated design principles, the no land use planning design principles in place in suburban California in the 1960s when Silicon Valley started being developed. And you go there now and it's not a very impressively built place. Right? It's not like visiting a cool European city. It's not even like Brooklyn. It's not like Portland, Oregon. It's not a place that had a lot of intentionality with how it was designed. These huge, like $4 million homes that, look like a house you just have in suburban Indianapolis. No knock in Indianapolis. It's just you can get houses there for less than $4 million. And they wanted to build this paradise of a city. They're frustrated about what was happening in California, how hard it was to transform the physical landscape that had all sorts of impact on the digital landscape, on how our minds work, on what we're addicted to digitally, had huge financial success. They're used to be able to make these fundraising pitches saying, hey, we're going to change the world and we're going to get rich doing it. And then they'd invent, Angry Birds, or in China, they'd like TikTok or like Facebook, and they'd say, hey, we've changed the world. harvesting a bunch of attention and therefore harvesting a bunch of money. But you drive around their town and I don't know, it doesn't look like Venice in the 1500s, I'll tell you that.
90 seconds.
And I'm fascinated by this topic for several reasons. We'll talk about it after. We'll also talk about whatever you want to talk about. We'll also talk about we'll talk about daylight savings a little bit. But if you have a view on Solano County, I'm interested in that. But also on this question of what should you do if you're a billionaire and you want things to be different? Do you just buy up the land? And now the interesting part, second interesting part, is they got to get a vote of the members of the county so they can do it. The residents. They've actually got to play a little bit of democracy. And are billionaires sufficiently in tune with democracy? Are they rooting for it? Do we want democracy, or do we want democracy to make? Do we want billionaires to make the decisions instead? It's an important set of questions raised by Solano County. Call in number 202-808-9925. How do I feel about daylight savings? I'm fine with it. How do I feel about Solano County? I'm not sure yet. We'll talk about it. This is the Thom Hartmann Show. What are the decisions that have been made by previous generations that we should be attuned to? What should we change? And if we change it, should we change it just by a handful of rich people buying it all up and replacing it? And if they replace it, is it a democracy, or do you live in the company town? And if we're going to try to transform the country, what do we want to transform it to? And how? This story of this little county, it's actually big geographically, to me is a discussion about the world, a discussion about the present state of affairs, a discussion about how we want things to run, who should be in charge, how decisions should be made, for what purpose. We'd love your view. 202-808-9925. Tom Show, your show. I'm Jeff.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Jefferson Smith. 202-808-9925. Scott, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning. How's it going?
It's going all right. How do you feel about daylight savings time?
I think they should stop it, really.
Really? All right. Well, you are not going to be elected a president.
That's the right way to say it, right?
You're not going to be elected president of the I'm fine with it movement. Okay. If you're not fine with it, then you're not going to be in charge of that movement.
Exactly. Hey, so I was reading the Spokesman Review this morning in Spokane here, and it looks like Russia's got a progressive tax. They're, they charge less tax to people who make less, and anybody who makes over, $500 million pays a lot more. Maybe someone could tell that to the Republicans and they get on board.
So you think that'd be the way to, if they, I don't know how Putin's wealth gets taxed. There's rumors he's a trillionaire, but the
we all know he's the richest man in the world.
Yeah, but you're saying if Nick Fuentes knew, if Drudge knew that they had a graduated income tax in Russia, that maybe they would be less excited about trumpeting that particular form of oligarchy.
Well, maybe they'll want to impose that on us here and make the wealthy pay more taxes. That's what I'm thinking.
I don't think it's going to go that way, but I like the way you're thinking. Thanks for the call, man. You be well.
Right on. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
Great. Bye.
Mike from Alameda, California.
Hey, Jefferson, that guy has a very unusual way of thinking, which appeals to me greatly. But on the question of daylight saving time,
yes,
I don't think any of us alive today knows what we're talking about, because it's been 4 generations since we had a world with only standard time. And every change of the clock, I am forced to go on the computer and write little emails to local television stations, whose talking heads say stupid things, untrue things about what happens when the clock is changed. They seem to think that the days become longer because we change our clocks.
We get 25 hours. And that's the thing about daylight savings time is it gives us 25 hours. It changes the speed by which the Earth turns, which is a remarkable thing to do. And I'm fine with it.
It surely is. Well, my personal bias, having been kept awake by being forced to go to bed while the sun was still up at a very early age, is that we should just try going back to standard time. But in any event, the proposal to go back to daylight time year-round, which is popular with some people for some reason.
Yes, my dad, he likes that idea.
Well, I'm saying we should never do that until we have first had the experience of living a year on standard time, so we can compare the two.
So we should just have daylight savings year and have non-daylight savings year and just see how it goes. And then do it for 2 years and then have a nationwide referendum and pick. So this is an interesting proposal. It is a counter argument that we're going to have to deal with the I'm Fine With It caucus. The I'm Fine With It caucus is going to have to come up with a set of talking points to counter your daylight savings year and standard time year proposal. But we'll work with our political consultants. We'll get back to you, Mike.
Thank you kindly.
Be well. We'll be back in just a second. This is Tom's show. I'm fine with it.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. You know, one of the grand questions that political scientists have been scratching their heads over for years in America is, why do right-wing billionaires fund anti-black history movements? Why are they pouring money into these people? Why are they funding anti-trans movements? I mean, what does this have to do with being a billionaire? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, and here's why. Almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance. 37 million of us live in dire poverty. 1 in 5 of us are illiterate. 1/4 of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental illness and can't get treatment. 316 people are shot every day in America. 44% of us carry student debt. And the billionaires don't want to pay income taxes to deal with any of these problems of society. That's the real issue. If they can get us fighting with each other over black history or over trans people or kids, they win. Then we're not talking about taxing them, raising their taxes to where they should be. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com that you can read and see all the stats and all the hot links. Check it out.
All right. I want to hear from Bruce in Petaluma, California. Bruce.
Good morning, Jefferson. Good. You're doing really well on your show, by the way.
Thank you.
This is an interesting topic on the property in Sedona, whatever that.
I think it's Solano. Not to be confused with Sedona or Sonoma or any of the others, which I had to look up this morning because I was getting it wrong like all the time.
I know. It's happening all over California. And what's going on? The new gold of California is property.
Yeah.
And the property, you build houses, and then you charge for those houses, and you charge very high rents. Property values in California are the highest in the country, and the rents are also about the highest in the country. And it's because these corporate buyers are building huge lots of houses, and then they own the market. Then they can charge whatever they want.
Yep.
And that's how it's working. And it's happening all over the state.
Yep.
This is not only Solano.
Yep.
So this is these rich guys want to buy up California, basically.
Yeah, no, it's a nice place. And how far is Petaluma from there?
It's from San Francisco. We are north of San Francisco, about an hour.
Okay.
A little less.
All right. So in the same, if not microclimate, at least vague climate region. And this is another, I mean, I'm fascinated by this story. I'm fascinated by this topic for so many reasons, including what you said, and also because we have so much concentrated wealth, right? More concentrated wealth now than any time since the Gilded Age. And you're sitting around, you got Mark Andreessen, and what are you supposed to do with it? You read Hoffman, what are you supposed to do with it? Do you buy another company? Do you buy something else in sort of digital space? If you think that stocks are overvalued, do you go invest a bunch more and buy a bunch more Apple stock if it's available to you? Or do you say, wait a minute, why don't I just buy some land? Now, if you're a millionaire, you go and you buy yourself a duplex, right? Maybe a fourplex. But if you're a billionaire, you need a lot of those. And why not consolidate, buy them all in the same place, and then you can make your own little fiefdom? No,
That's how it's working.
I'm fascinated by it. What's the we're about to go to break. Is the reaction that you've heard positive or negative to this thing?
It's very negative because it's happening in nice little communities that are very peaceful, and they're started out with small spaces, small homes.
Yeah.
And people were happy being there. And then when they see
Thom
these...
Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Had to cut Bruce off, but thank you, Bruce, from almost a bird's eye view on this thing from California. Appreciate it. Call the number 202-808-9925. Thanks for calling.
From Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn, and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the two murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. The other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out, brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks. and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was quote, calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Welcome back. This is Thom Hartmann Show. We're talking about a number of things, including Solano County. Yes, it's newly daylight savings time. I'm a member of the I'm fine with it caucus. Are you fine with it? Maybe you're not fine with it. We're less sure we're fine with a small group of people buying up a whole bunch of land, and not merely for an easy binary reason, but because there's a lot of angles of this thing that I'm just fascinated by. Who's in charge? Who should be in charge? How should democracy work? How should democracy respond to decisions made a long time ago? Who should own land? How should that work? Another we just got into was the impacts of significant wealth concentration. You got to do something with that wealth. You're going to have a family office that tells you to do something with that wealth. A lot of angles. Let's hear yours. Let's go to, I think it's Tom from Vacaville. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, hey, good morning, Jefferson. I'm calling from Vacaville, California. It's in Solano County. It's probably 2 miles from this proposed 400,000 person city.
Ah, wonderful. On the ground. Thank you.
And so I got to say that most of the people I talked to around town, it's going to come up for a vote in a couple of months, I believe.
Yeah,
and
it's real time.
People are opposed. Yeah, most people are opposed to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already congested here as it is. There's a major highway 80 between Sacramento and San Francisco. It turns into a parking lot most nights. And so I can't see that unless they have some flying cars or some various different transportation, breakthroughs, that this would be somehow a feasible project of that scale. There is also Travis Air Force Base, which is right pretty much next to all this land they're buying, and if they have they changed their plan so they wouldn't affect the Air Force Base, because that'd be a huge.
You cut out just for a second. You said they changed their plans, so they did what with the Air Force Base?
They would not affect the Air Force Base.
Got it. Is the Air Force, out of curiosity, is the Air Force Base to the north, south, east, or west? I assume it's to the east, but that's just an assumption. Where is the Air Force Base in relationship to the land they've bought, the two times the size of San Francisco plot?
Exactly. It's just slightly, if I'm looking at a map, maybe east of it or west of it, just like within a couple of miles east or west of it. I think which side.
So all they need to do is tell the Air Force planes to just not go over the city. Just please just fly east.
They have training missions where they fly at night and various other.
Well, we're going to need them to fly in a different direction. Just like, please, you're allowed to go. If let's say it's to the east, I'm guessing it's to the east, because if we're to the west, they'd have to fly even further. But let's say it's to the east. We'll just have to say then you're allowed to fly north, you're allowed to fly south, you're allowed to fly east, but only 3 directions. You can't not all 360 degrees. You know what I'm saying? Because it's going to be really, to Mark Andreessen's new house, it's going to be a bummer.
Yep. And the population of Solano County now is about 300,000. They're proposing a 400,000 person place. I mean, come on. That's insane, right? That's like, so.
And so right now, your guess, I haven't seen any local polling. I don't know. But right now, have you, I mean, it might be all the supporters are quiet about it, but have you talked to anybody who's in favor of this thing, other than the people who try to do it?
Everyone I talk to in town, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about around town. I've been here for 30 years, and so we talk to people all the time. Not one person I know is supportive of this type of thing.
All right, here's another angle, and thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for calling, because you're right there on the ground. Appreciate it so much. So here's another angle I'm fascinated by, and this is the relative to democracy, relating to democracy, the arrogance of the modern super wealthy. There has become just this huge arrogance, this huge blind spot, and I'm not even trying to wage class warfare. I'm not really trying to criticize. I'm only trying to describe. And we see it all over the place. We've seen it a bunch of times. We saw it with Steve Jobs' conversation with Barack Obama. Was he just said, we should do this and this and this with the country. And Barack Obama would say, well, yeah, we'd have to get through Congress, have to do this, have to do that. And he just sort of threw up his hands and like, government takes way too long. Government's way too hard, right? Democracy is harder. What you're talking about,
exactly.
Do we want the whole
needs are a lot better than just one per billionaire's needs, right?
Yeah. Do you want the whole country to run like Apple? It really is a key question. Right. Apple makes some neat products, right? They charge a lot for them, and they don't recycle them very well. But they make some neat products, and they make them effectively. And a lot of people, heck, I'm addicted to them. And but do we want the whole world to run that way? Do we want the whole country to run that way? When what Tim Cook decides, and before him, what Steve Jobs decides, is what goes. And yes, it's more efficient, but is it better? And there is this arrogance. There's this arrogance that's developed because so many people, I see it all the time, and I urge people who are listening to, now that you've heard this, keep this one in mind. It's going to come up over and over again. When Nick Kristof tried to run for governor of Oregon, it was the same thing. He's a neat guy, smart guy, but I absolutely know the conversations he had with powerful and wealthy people, not both things, sometimes at the same time, not always, in Manhattan. I know the conversations he had. And I'm sure he heard this 35 times, which is why he ran for governor. He heard, if we could just get someone like you in there. If we could just get someone like you in there, it'd be okay. You're smart. I've read your stuff in the New York Times. You're smart. You're better than all these idiots. And it's this thought that like politicians are just a bunch of dum-dums. And the fact of the matter is that people who spend their life in public service, I think we should transform a lot of those systems. I think we should attract a lot of additional do-gooders into public service. But a lot of those people are professionals and skilled and talented and smart and could have done other things that would have made a bunch of money. And if you stuck Mark Andreessen or Steve Jobs in Congress, they wouldn't magically throw around a bunch of Apple or Netflix or Netscape pixie dust and make everything change. And if they did, you know what it would be? It would be called an autocracy. We have this deep arrogance that is running through the power structures of our country. And Silicon Valley, I fear, has it worse than most. It's just thinking like, well, I've bought politicians before, and they always say, here's another thing that drives it. Oh, you can tell I'm fired up. Here's another thing that drives it, is that the donor is the smartest person in the room. The donor is always the smartest person in the room. I've seen this, I won't name names, but somebody who had been a friend ran for office. And I knew that they had consistently been the smartest person in the room for a decade. But what they didn't understand was they were the smartest person in the room for a decade, including rooms with a lot of the smartest political people, because all those people wanted their money. Because each person who was coming to do those meetings either was asking for money or had asked for money not too long ago or was anticipating ask for money at some point. And so they had an inflated view of their small d democratic brilliance. And they ran for office, and guess what happened? They didn't win. They stopped being the smartest person in the room. In fact, very often they were like 7th. And among candidates, very often they were like 3rd. And they weren't dumb. They weren't a bad person. They were effective, good person, accomplished. But they had seen the world through a lens of privilege that they had failed to see the lens. They had just seen the distorted world. And the same thing is happening in Manhattan and happening in Silicon Valley. It's like, well, we kind of run the world. We make all the money. Everybody else must be dumb, right? Almost everybody just does what we say because they work for us or they wish they did or they want some stock options. They want us to invest in something. We leave a big wake. We're always the smartest ones, so we know what's best, right? We have it all figured out. But then it turns out they have to pass a ballot initiative in Solano County, California. And then maybe they're the smartest person in the room. And maybe they have the best idea, and maybe everybody's going to like their idea. A lot of people sold them their land. They liked the idea of the money. But maybe not. That we've got to elevate the esteem of democracy. We've got to elevate our recognition that people in public service, people who run nonprofits, people who are advocates, yes, even people who are lobbyists, people who are elected officials, we need to encourage them to be better. We've got to get more and more good people doing it. We've got to improve their incentive structures. I'm a sortition fan. I think we shouldn't just leave democracy to politicians. I got all kinds of critiques and all kinds of suggestions. But let's not root those critiques and root those suggestions in arrogance. Particularly arrogance that merely is driven by financial success. Just because you're great at one thing doesn't mean you're great at another thing. I mean, I remember when Wes Clark ran for office, ran for president. What a talented guy. Holy mackerel, what an accomplished person. I wish I had his discipline. Terrifically accomplished. You walk in any room just as accomplished as anybody in that room. And I'm sure you heard 36 times, Wes, just somebody as accomplished, just wish somebody as accomplished with you or would run for office. Oh, geez, we just have somebody as good as you. The challenge is that Wes Clark, throughout his life, had operated in a structure, not of soft power, but where in his conversations, the person would do what they were told to do based either on a hope for promotion or on the risk of a court-martial. Once you're in a legislative body, once you're in a democracy, once you're on a jury, it's a different incentive structure. You have to operate with persuasion and values, hopefully facts, hopefully shared objectives, maybe give and take. And this deeply accomplished person, not quite ready. Not because they don't have the basic talent, just not quite ready. And say what you will about the career politician, that person has been working to get ready. Anyway, I could say more about this. Daylight savings time, I'm fine with it. deep arrogance based on a deepening class division in our country, or a set of class divisions in our country, I'm not as okay with it. I'm not as okay with it. I think I don't know what should happen in Solano County. Maybe they should build their dream city. I think it would be neat to do big things. How are we going to do big things? I'm still open to the discussion. I take your calls. But it shouldn't just be rooted in class-based arrogance. Let's go to Teresa from Cave Junction, Oregon. My stepmother lived in Cave Junction when I was a very small child. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, just what you were talking about, the billionaires. I grew up in Southern California, and, this was in the 60s, though, in a small town, well, it was small then, Encinitas. And my dad was a Greyhound bus driver and had 4 kids, and we could afford to live there. Well, now you can't. You have to be a billionaire to live there. And it seems like all up and down the coast, like the East Coast and the West Coast, that is what is happening now.
Yeah.
And it seems sad because, the middle class used to be able to live wherever they wanted to live.
Yeah.
And it's like now, it seems like now we can't live where we'd like to live. Like I lived in Sacramento, and I saw a lot of the wealthy people, they're taking over Tahoe. So it's like, we have to, I don't know. I just think it's really sad. I think if, people are middle class, they work hard all their lives, they should be able to live where they want to live, not get pushed out because of money.
No, Teresa, thank you so much for the call. And it's not only an issue of fairness, it's also an issue of just what's going to work. Because if a teacher can't live near the school, right, if a nurse can't live near the doctor or the hospital, it just makes it harder for communities to function. Makes traffic worse, it increases social divisions. It's just we're losing a sense of shared experience. These are the big topics. The story in this little county, mid-sized county, it's a story about the whole thing. And Teresa, I appreciate your call. Let's go to break. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Show. I'm Jeff Smith, and we appreciate you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is the Thom Hartmann Show. I'm Jeff Smith, 202-808-9925. You fine with it? You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Show. I'm Jefferson Smith. We are talking about Solano County, and we've got a call from Carol in Vacaville, which I think is in the county. Go ahead, Carol.
Yes. Hi, Jefferson. No, I live in Fairfield in Solano County, which is actually where they want to build this city.
Oh, very good.
Here's what nobody's talking about.
All right.
They're sending around pictures of it. And you can see from their renderings that all the homes are connected. And my suspicion is this is going to be a huge rental area. Mm-hmm. There's other problems. Where is the water going to come from? And they sent around these questionnaires to us that were like a joke. They asked the most inane questions. They were very sneaky, and some people who won't sell the land, they're going after them and they're suing them. Now, and this is basically not a rural county. Fairfield, which is where the city is going to be adjacent to,
it's Fairfield, thank you.
120,000 people.
Yep.
Excuse me?
I was just saying again the name of the town that's adjacent to it, which is Fairfield. I didn't know that part. Thank you. Keep going.
Yeah. So, we're all highly suspicious. I mean, they were doing this on the sly. And the guy who's running it, Jan Smarnek, I may be mispronouncing his last name, he was overheard on a hot mic saying that we're going to get our way.
Mm-hmm.
might take a while, but we're going to get our way. So yeah, it's pretty shocking, their arrogance.
And you're in the county. Are you part of the voting base? Are you one of the people that will have to vote on the initiative to give over power to these folks?
Absolutely. And
it
I already
sound
gave
like
them my point.
It doesn't sound like you're voting yes.
Oh, heck no. No.
Have you talked to anybody? Have you talked to anybody who is?
No, there's nobody who's for this. And like that other gentleman who was from Vacaville mentioned, 80, we're 45 minutes from San Francisco and 45 minutes from Sacramento. 80 goes right through our town. Any city.
You said 80, Interstate 80.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
So any city that they're going to build that's, adjacent to where we are, it's going to have to use 80, which is already a parking lot on some days. So the whole notion is preposterous. And I think that it all boils down to that they want to build a city of rentals because they keep pushing the phrase that this is going to be a walking city.
Yeah.
And like I said, all the renderings show, it looks like one apartment after another.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the calls from the people on the ground. It's it's so great. I'm so glad we brought this up. So you raised two big questions. So transportation and water. Now, and again, it's part of this, and I don't want to throw arrogance as a stone. I want to question arrogance. I want to investigate, interrogate, and be cautious of it. It's like, oh, we'll build this city. And then how are people going to get there? Well, you're going to build the roads. Are those going to be private roads? Or are you going to ask the people to pay for those? And if they're private roads, they're going to be toll roads. How do you get the money back for that? There's a reason why we built multilateral contracting that we call government. Because some things are better done by a bunch of people rather than just by a few people. Similar to water. Where's the water coming from? California's already got water problems. It's all being used to grow palm wonderful. Arizona phrase is water runs uphill towards money. Ultimately, if you got the dough, you can buy it. But if you got the dough, can you buy the election? We'll see.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. I want to go to John, because John lives in Solano County. And maybe he has another view. Maybe he wants this dream city of unanticipated transportation and water access. And unanticipated, I mean, I don't understand what it's going to be. Maybe he wants these row houses near San Francisco based on new design principles. John, what's your view?
Is this me?
Yes, it's you.
Hi, Jefferson. Long time no talk to.
Yeah.
The city of Vacaville had this same issue about 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
and someone wanted to, an Auslander wanted to build something in the neighborhood, and it was a small city known as Manzanita. And me and the group I worked with, the California League of Conservation Voters, figured out an angle to defeat its implementation.
Oh, interesting.
And and then that was 40 years ago. And in the meantime, in the 90s, specifically, we investigated wine, grape growing regions and winery, tasting room places and stuff like that for Solano County. But they had some unique rules, so we kind of shut that down. And then there's one big flaw with Solano County that no one's really quite touched on. You got close to it, though, and that's water.
Yeah.
There's a huge groundwater issue.
Yeah. We got 30 seconds.
Solano County drains into the San Francisco Bay Delta, and it mixes right there. And the southwest corner of this community is right at the edge of Travis Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And what do they do at military installations? They bury their trash underground and anything that's fuel and stuff like that. So the groundwater's got some real contamination issues. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. I didn't know about the groundwater issues, and I know. I mean, there are all kinds of old institutions, particularly those that don't have small d or democratic limitations, that risk meaningful pollution. And appreciate the story in Vacaville from 40 years ago, and it does, though, it doesn't beg the question. That's a wrong use of the term, but it still raises the question, how are we going to do big things in this country? We'll be back. Thank you so much for jumping into that topic.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929, when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative, yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. This is the Thom Hartmann Program. If you're waiting patiently to talk about, I think we touched a nerve with this Solano County thing, man. And if you want to share your view, if you have particular insight, perspective on this that we haven't covered, and you're waiting, we'll get to you. We'll come back to it. And same if you've been waiting very patiently to talk about daylight savings time, we'll get back to you. Right now, we have a very honored guest. Now, honored guest is Svante Myrick. He is the president for the People for the American Way, former mayor of Ithaca, New York. He was then the youngest mayor. I think he was 24 years old then. Old enough to vote and old enough to be the mayor. And he's with us now. Svante, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
How long were you mayor of Ithaca, and did you ever try to sell the city to a private group of investors to create a new land development?
The entire city, like an ice town.
Well, yeah, just like they're trying to do in Solano County, like Disney did in Florida, right? It doesn't just have to be on the West Coast. We could try this in various places. Just get some real rich people together, start buying farmland under a private, just, quiet company name, and then try to build a PR campaign to get through the land use rules.
Yeah, I wish I could say that, frankly. I mean, I know that's in the news. I was referring, of course, when I was mayor of Ithaca. I was elected 24. I ended up serving for 10 years as mayor, so I was the longest serving mayor in Ithaca's history. And only towards the end.
And by the time you were done, I think you were almost old enough to run for president.
Well, I'm old enough now,
yeah.
Though I'm not considering it this. But throughout my 20s, my term coincided, unfortunately, with Parks and Rec, which is a lovely show.
Sure.
If you've ever seen it, one of the funniest ever. But Ben Wyatt, the character there, was a town manager when he was in his 20s. This was part of the show's lore. And he had sold his town to a ice-themed amusement park.
Oh, yes. Right. That's what you're talking about. The Ice City.
I thought you were asking. Yes, I thought you were asking if Ice Town had made Ice Clown frown. Which is something people would tweet at me quite often. And it just triggered some deep-seated trauma for me.
To say you were the Ben Wyatt of Ithaca, New York. You were gonna sell the city not to California forever, but to Ice Town and be an ice clown. All right. Yes. So you're now People for American Way. By the way, R.I.P. American hero Norman Lear. And you guys have come out with your World Freedom Report, State of World Freedom Report? Tell me about this report.
Yeah, so and I really appreciate you mentioning Norman. I think a lot of listeners will know that Norman Lear, who was a TV producer, he's much more than that. I mean, he was a patriot, he was a citizen. He was a veteran of World War II, where he ran 50 bomber missions over Nazi Germany. But he came home to find that simply because he was progressive, because he was Jewish, because he worked in a creative industry, some people claimed that he was not truly American, not truly patriotic. This, of course, rankled him, but it really began to gall him and a group of other people in 1980 who got together to found People for the American Way. When those so-called patriots began attacking the thing that we believe makes our country so great in the first place, which is democracy and our right to choose. Our right to choose our own leaders, our right to be governed by people that we consent to, and not to have our leaders chosen for us, say, and a former president who intends to hand down his throne to one of his bungling adult male sons or possibly his daughter, and we're really concerned about that. So we have been working around the clock, and we did actually just release a report about what we think is the greatest threat to democracy right now, and that is Project 2025. If folks go online, and they search People for the American Way, Project 2025,
I think I know this.
They will see a 900-page report from Christian, right-wing, radical Christian evangelicals who are controlling right now, with Stephen Miller and Bannon and the rest, the Trump campaign, have a 900-page report on how they're going to fill 4,000 federal appointments and turn the entire federal bureaucracy into a Christian nationalist movement that will begin the great purge of our nation of people like Norman. So we here, who just are still mourning Norman's loss in December at the age of 101 years old, are dedicated to fighting against that and making sure the best way to fight against that is to make sure people know that it exists, that what's at stake. These aren't secret plans being made in a smoke-filled back room. This is not conspiracy theory fodder being, shot around chat rooms. This is the real plan. They honest to goodness, they're confident enough to put it to paper. They feel like they can't be stopped. We want to expose that plan and make sure people know what's at stake.
So this is, this is a Christo-fascist deep state fever dream. This is the hope that they can install people who've come up through the family, people who've come up through the Koch network, people who've come up through the right-wing leadership development pipelines, people who've come up through their right-wing church networks, install them in every position within the federal government, and create not only a think tank, but a do tank, and this time it's going to be called the federal government.
That's exactly right. And why not? Because, hey, it worked before. When they set out to do this to the Supreme Court, a lot of people thought it couldn't be done, that they couldn't capture a majority, much less 6 out of 9 seats, right? 6 out of 9 seats that all come from the family, that all are dedicated to this extreme Christo-fascist vision of America. And a lot of folks thought, well, you're being hyperbolic. They're not actually going to overturn Roe. It's been settled law for decades. They're not actually going to take away women's right to contraception. The same people are now saying, well, they're not actually going to come for the right to get divorced. Well, they are. Look at their page. Look at Project 2025. They want to make it impossible to get a divorce in this country. They want to make it nearly impossible for women to work outside the home. And they realized that not only did they have great success with the Supreme Court, so they know that it can work, but they have also now seen the limits of what a president alone can do. Yeah. Because they felt like when President Trump was in the first time, he was stifled by all of these civil servants and bureaucrats who, how dare they, maintain their oath to the Constitution instead of pledging allegiance to Donald Trump. So this time, they want to do to the entire federal bureaucracy what they did to the Supreme Court. And again, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy theorist. Somewhere, these people who write Project 2025 who are hearing me say this are nodding their heads in earnest. They're like, absolutely right. We feel that they are going to replace the head of the Department of Justice, but not just the head. They're going to make sure that every deputy secretary, every undersecretary, every secretary's secretary, every administrative assistant has pledged allegiance to the United States of Trump and not to the U.S. Constitution, so that when the next January 6th happens, for example, they are not frustrated by these pesky White House lawyers telling them what's legal and what's not legal, by these pesky FBI directors and deputy directors who are telling them who they can and cannot assassinate, that they're not bothered by these pesky IRS agents who are telling them that it's illegal to start targeting your opponents and auditing them and digging through your opponent's taxes. They want to replace the upper echelons of all of these bureaucracies with loyalists not because they're dumb, but because they're quite smart. And they figured out that the last time they had a shot at total domination of the federal government, it was dedicated civil servants, as well as some folks of the judiciary, that stopped them from a total takeover. They're gonna, on day one, they're planning to make sure that they're ready to finish the job.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're sharing this. This is the biggest thing that's happening. I mean, this is when the short version describing Trump as a would-be authoritarian, and people then say that sentence and don't necessarily connect all the dots of what that means, and how you wield the levers of power, about what it's going to take to wield those levers, what you're going to use those levers to do, and how it's going to impact things we take for granted too much, how that's going to impact people's lives, right? It just becomes kind of a talk. Well, he's authoritarian, and then it just gets into the din. But now, in a second term, and the thing we were talking about yesterday was not just framing this debate as about Joe Biden or about Joe Biden versus Trump looking backwards, or a referendum on Joe Biden looking backwards, but on what's going to happen under Biden versus what's going to happen under Trump. That's the real decision to be made. What's going to happen under Trump is, and they're not secret about it, and they're not lying about it.
No.
And to compare it to the thing we were talking about just a moment ago, with billionaires going up and buying land and trying to make their own city, and it might be being arrogant, and they come up in front of a vote and that they might lose. Yeah. These folks aren't arrogant. These folks aren't just people who blithely think the government is something they can run after spending some dollars. These are people who have proven that they can do it. They've proven that they can buy the Supreme Court. They've proven that they can buy lots of the lower courts. And now they want to buy the entirety of the federal government and not just the elected officials. And unlike the Eisenhower regime, unlike the Nixon regime, unlike the Reagan regime, unlike the Bush regime, when there was a bipartisan agreement about the importance of democracy itself, it's now really clear that there is no longer that bipartisan agreement. The MAGA base now of the right wing likes Putin more than they like a Democratic elected official in the United States who's not a MAGA Republican.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of the biggest thing. So that's just me affirming what you're saying. I appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead. We got about a minute, and then we'll go to break. We'll come back to you.
Oh, apologies. I was just going to say, this is exactly why I left being mayor. I loved being mayor of Ithaca, New York. I had never lost an election, and my life was full of talking about the things I'm passionate about, affordable housing, fixing sidewalks, and our water quality. And I watched January 6th, and I think the greatest lie that they've pulled off is that they've convinced a lot of the American people that January 6th was an unfortunate and terrible riot, pulled off by MAGA extremists, yes, but it was just that. It was not an unfortunate riot. It was the culmination. It wasn't a bumbling attempt. It was a culmination of months of effort of taking over the U.S. government. And I think if they had had 2 more months to get ready, they would have achieved it.
Yep.
And I think they've now had 4 more years to plan the next one, which is what we all have to put our wheel against the shoulder for, and what we at People for the American Way are getting ready to defend against.
And if they had a rehearsal.
Right. Which they now have.
We organize complex events. Right. And we always say, every event has a rehearsal. You just hope that rehearsal doesn't happen on the day of the event. They've now had a practice run. Second term will be worse. Second chance will be worse. It's the biggest stuff nationally that's going on. I appreciate it. Stick with us just for a moment, because we want to hear about how folks can fight back, and then we'll be back and we'll continue the topics we've been talking about. Thanks, everybody. You're listening to Tom's Show. I'm Jefferson Smith. It's your show. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back in just a little bit. And we're here with Svante Myrick, the president of People for American Way, and talking about Project 2025, the coordinated effort to install 4,000 Christo-fascist, Christian nationalists, MAGA Republicans, trained operatives within the federal government to make the federal government the full lever of their authoritarian power. So what's People for the American Way? You say you want people to know about this, which is helpful. Thank you very much. Once we know about it, what are we and what are you supposed to do about it?
Yeah. That's such a tough question, because not everybody can leave their jobs and agree to become president of People for the American Way, because I already took that one. That one's mine, and I'm not letting it go. But there's a role here, of course, for everybody, particularly people of faith. I have to say this, I grew up in the church as a Baptist. I am still a person who believes in my higher power, and the things that my pastors taught me over the years are important to me. So when I say that Christian nationalists and Christo-fascists are going to take over our government, it is not the Christian part I'm worried about. It is the nationalist and the fascist part, because I may have my own beliefs, but I think that People who are Jewish and people who are atheists and people who are Protestant, Catholic, and Muslim for that matter, should be granted full American citizenship with all of the rights and liberties that entails. And let's be clear about what the people who are behind Project 2025, they do not agree. They do not agree. They have said so openly and publicly on the stage at CPAC. They've proclaimed it. We need to start listening to them. They are going to force all of us to live by their religious dogma and doctrine, and that is what's un-American. So we at People for the American Way, we're organizing networks of Black African-American ministers to push back. We're organizing networks of young elected officials. We're organizing networks of seniors. If there's any seniors listening, we have an organization called Grandparents for Truth that's been going toe-to-toe with Moms for Liberty for months now. And what we find is that our grandparents, who have that slightly longer lens of history, are able to really break through with policy leaders and voters, able to explain to them why it's important that we stand up against censorship for freedom. People who want to get involved can check us out at pfaw.org. It's peoplefortheamericanway.org. And of course, we're going to be fighting this November across 9 different key battleground states. But we also fight what we believe is the real battle is for the reverse coattails. And of course, you know, listeners of the Thom Hartmann Program will know what our coattails means. It means if there's a popular candidate at the top of the ticket, they may sweep other people into office. Say, you know, it's a big wave election year like 2008 or 2016. If the person at the top of the ticket is extremely popular, it may drag some other folks down ballot across the ticket. Across the finish line. Well, we believe that reverse coattails are a thing too. And that if we can get people really excited to vote for their local mayor, for their local city council member, get excited to come out and vote for who's best to be sheriff in your county, who's best to be a member of Congress, that they will actually drag the top of the ticket across the finish line too. So we're going to be focused really, really down ballot, helping people out with frankly, it only takes a little bit of money and a little bit of time making calls to excite a local population. So we would invite people to join us in that effort to focus down.
Check it out at pfaw.org. Savante, I hope we have a chance to talk again. Thank you so much. And I'd put a plug in for state legislative bodies.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your work.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
And we're back, and welcome. Thank you for people who've been patient. Let's get to your calls. We've been talking about, we got 3 topics we've been talking about. We're talking about daylight savings time. Fine with it. I'm fine with it. We're talking about Solano County, and not only what's happening in that county, but thank you to the residents of that county who have been calling and giving us their sort of on-the-ground perspective. But it illustrates, it exemplifies, it highlights so many of the themes that are impacting our democracy right now, including housing, including wealth disparities, including land hoarding, including wealth concentration, including democracy itself, including water, including transportation, including arrogance, including what it takes to actually make change, including how should we deal with old decisions that are old decisions, particularly in our physical landscape. Lots of stuff it brings up. And we've also been talking now about Project 2025. Let's go straight to your calls right now. Let's go to Mark from Salem, Oregon. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing good, but I feel kind of trivial after this last discussion you had. So, but anyways, I'm going to go forward.
Go ahead, go forward.
Daylight savings time to me is like the perfect lesson for democracy. And I'll tell you why, because to get a legislation passed or to get a ballot measure passed, you need 50%. Mm-hmm. And daylight savings time is almost evenly split between people who want standard, people who want daylight, and people who want to leave the damn thing alone, like me. And I have a lot of fun watching the other two sides fight it out.
Hey, which side are you? Which side are you?
Well, I'm on keep it the way it is.
Yeah, we're fine with it. We're fine. You're part of Team Fine with it. There you go. We need T-shirts.
Jefferson, here's the thing. No matter what position you have, especially in Oregon, no matter what position you have, and I think this is true nationally, 2/3 of the people are against you. So you're never going to get legislation passed. This is why this thing has stalled for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so
we have inertia on our side.
We do. I mean, it's fun to watch the other two sides battle it out while nothing changes. But here's the question. Is there a way to, this is really a good lesson in democracy and electoral systems.
Yeah.
Because is there a way to put this on the ballot with a ranked choice voting option?
Yep.
And if you could do that,
then there might be something to change. Then something.
And then you
could
could have also a demonstration of how you could take an issue that is almost impossible to settle. To settle it with.
Yeah. No, it is an issue. It is an interesting application. And my guess is, on a ranked choice ballot, fine with it. It'd do pretty good. I think it'd do pretty good. Robert, you got 30 seconds on Solano County.
Okay, I think it's just, the Solano County thing is likening to the buying up the orange groves in L.A. If you look at the maps of the Bay Area, that's the last undeveloped county that's actually waterfront to the Bay. Yeah. And unless you count Sonoma and Napa, but or Marin, and if you know the Bay Area, those are all upper class communities, wine country. You ain't buying land there.
Yeah, no, the plan was half smart, and maybe even 2/3 smart. The question is going to be all the way smart, because they went to the one place where the land wasn't already jacked up, where you didn't already have, Hollywood millionaires, now more than millionaires, who had built wineries, right, in Napa and Sonoma. You didn't already have people who had built these palatial estates. It was a little more working class, a little more farmland, a little more doable. So they were half smart. The question is whether they're going to be able to go all the way.
There's no other land to buy around the Bay Area other than that.
Yep. Robert, thanks for the call. Listen to Tom's show.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. 202-808-9925.
We're reading The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence by Michael D'Antonio. This is from the first chapter. For decades, Pence had presented himself as a humble servant who could be entrusted with power because he was at heart a mild-mannered Midwesterner. Friends and foes alike said his major character trait was extreme niceness. When given the opportunity, Pence described himself as a true Hoosier, son of Indiana, who was a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. This is how he had introduced himself to the country at the Republican National Convention 6 months earlier. The list contrasted with the usual pledge politicians make to put country first. This is what President Obama did after the 2016 election, when he said, "We are not Democrats first, we are not Republicans first, we are Americans first." The vice president's self-declared identity revealed both his priorities and the source of his power. For 30 years, he had helped lead the Republican Party into a closer alliance with preachers who were turning evangelical Christianity from a religion into a political crusade that engaged in a culture war with non-believers. The aim of many was to destroy abortion rights, roll back the equality gained by gay citizens, and prepare the nation for the second coming of Christ. Pence and others used martial metaphors and considered themselves warriors of the Christian right, both besieged and called upon to fight. Quote, "Those who would have us ignore the battle being fought over life, marriage, and religious liberty have forgotten the lessons of history," said Pence in 2010. America's darkest moments have come when economic arguments trumped moral principles. Pence's allies in his war included hugely wealthy donors who, despite their vast wealth accumulated at a time of historic inequality, also posed as victims. As libertarians in the mold of Ayn Rand's cardboard characters, they felt inhibited in the pursuit of even greater riches by a government that imposed foolish regulations and would redistribute their wealth to the supposedly indolent poor. Starting with this perspective, they denied the science behind environmental protection, demanded tax cuts for themselves, and insisted on massive reductions in programs serving anyone who wasn't rich. The victimhood claimed by both the libertarians and the Christian right permitted the construction of an alternative reality that denied their own power and masked their ambition to make politics and culture conform to an ideology that included white Christian supremacy and predatory capitalism. It also denied the progress they had made in their construction of their own political might. With his oath of office, Vice President Pence became both the free marketer's hero and the most successful Christian supremacist in American history. Most of Pence's life had been preparation for this moment, and possibly one more. His lifelong goal, set when he was a boy, was the Oval Office itself. Remarkably, he had reached this point by tying his fate to Donald J. Trump, a man whose immorality in the form of lying, cheating, and deceiving in every aspect of his life, from his marriage to his businesses, had made him a living exemplar of everything that Christianity and conservatism abhorred. However, this record also suggested that Pence was more likely to assume the highest office in the land than most vice presidents who had come before. To put it bluntly, Trump was vulnerable to impeachment. If this occurred, Pence would see the hand of God at work in his elevation to the presidency. In the meantime, he would wait and watch. On Inauguration Day, with Pence looking on, a slightly stooped Donald Trump stepped forward when it was his turn to face the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts. Beside Trump stood his wife, Melania, the former fashion model, who held two Bibles, Lincoln's and Trump's own. At the stroke of noon, the president-elect raised his right hand and placed his left on the Bibles. As he did this, Trump's family members and hundreds of political and government figures strained to see the moment. Trump and Pence were a study in contrast. At age 58, Pence appeared trim, perhaps even athletic, and could have passed for a man 10 years younger. His jacket was neatly buttoned, his hands were clasped at his waist, and his smooth face was set in a half smile. Mere feet away, in some, he resembled a small-town pastor, or maybe even a funeral director. Mere feet away, a stern-faced 70-year-old Trump stood with his coat hanging open like a caftan to reveal a long red necktie. Despite much cosmetic intervention, he looked old and tired. At the conclusion of the presidential oath, which had been voiced by 44 presidents before him, Trump said the words, "So help me God," and accepted the congratulations of those closest to him with a thin-lipped, toothless grin. He then delivered a 15-minute speech replete with distortions and falsehoods that were his trademark. He declared that America was awash with crime and despair and under constant attack. "This American carnage stops right here and stops right now," said Trump. It was the most remembered phrase of the address. "That was some weird S-word," former President George W. Bush was heard to remark as he left the inaugural stand. Weird was the mildest word that one could attach to the 45th President of the United States as he launched an administration that would be stained by scandal and corruption so broad it defied a citizen's ability to grasp. Cronyism, secrecy, and nepotism would flourish. Presidential lies, daily cataloged by the Washington Post and others, would come at the rate of more than 150 per month. From the moment of his oath, Mike Pence, the vice president, faced the historic, some would say daunting, challenge of dealing with an erratic and undisciplined commander-in-chief. The book, The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence.
Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's." This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
my dog. All right. Some of y'all have been waiting very, very patiently. We're going to go to your calls. We are talking Project 2025. We are still talking daylight savings time, and we are talking buying up big pieces of land and figuring out what we want to do with it. And that's why I'm here today, to sell you plots of land or to recruit you to our plan to buy up big plots of land. Solano County is largely taken. Maybe they'll sell cheap when they realize if they run into something they can't get done. But if you want to help me on our land buying scheme, call right in, 202-808-9925. Let's go to Claudia from Newport, Oregon. You're on the air.
Oh, hey, that's good, Jefferson, the land buying up thing.
There you go.
Okay, we're not that evil, though, remember?
Oh, yeah,
We're
okay.
supposed to be on the good side. Anyway, I'm firmly in the camp with I'm good with the time change thing. I mean, mainly
you're fine with it.
because
You're fine with you're on the. I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it, and because it's tradition.
Yeah.
And I never thought I'd say this because I'm not a traditionalist. I'm not kind of a conservative, but in my old age, and now I am, because it turns out my sociology professors were right about tearing down our traditions creates chaos with certain people who, need tradition. Anyway, let's go on to...
it took me a long time to learn spring forward and fall back. Now that I've learned it, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, and plus we can remember where we were when, we were late for that class because of it.
It's a shared experience
blah, blah, blah.
of occasional failure, something to bond over.
Yeah, both are very important, really.
I'm fine with it.
I called about the real estate issue, although I got to say real quick, the Project 2025, what we can do is just send it out and open the conversation. I send it to everybody. Most people think I'm crazy, but just send a link to what Project 2025 is so people know what it is.
Yep.
Anyway, I just wanted to say about people buying up real estate. I grew up 10 minutes away from San Francisco in a place called Marin County, which when I grew up, you could actually, a man could afford to buy a house working at a gas station.
Yep.
And I'm not kidding you.
Yeah, no, I know.
And it was a very interesting place because there were a diverse group of people, but little by little, year by year, yes, it got bought up by people with more money, and we were all forced to move north and then move north again and move north again. And it's like, I think it caused a lot of mental illness, homelessness, but also mental illness, I think, because certain people, they wanted to live. I wasn't one of those. I wanted to go, but certain people wanted to live where they grew up at, and they weren't able to anymore.
No, it's disruptive. If you can't, and it also continues to divide us, maybe along political lines, but definitely along class lines. We're losing a sense of shared experience. And I appreciate, Claudia, the call so much. Appreciate you being part of this community. Let's go straight to Mark. You have a wonderful day. Marsh, let's go straight to you in Santa Monica, California. Don't worry, we're going to take East Coast calls too. But we've touched a nerve with these Californians. Go ahead.
Hi, Jefferson. I'd like to humbly recommend that the Solano County stipulated conditional use permit, that the developers demonstrate how they intend to perform the triple bottom line, which means how they perform financially, how they perform socially, and how they perform environmentally in this new community. I also like to say that other eco-villages, there's information at IC.org, which stands for Intentional Community, and information about best practices for reusing water, like gray water systems, and management of the community called Sociocracy. There's classes on that. And there's also, I went to a community where they have a practice of perpetual affordability. They have a way they have a board that helps manage perpetual affordability. somebody recently suggested a book called Climate Solutions Beyond Capitalism by Tina Landis. And if these are proven people that can accomplish things, I think we're at a critical time of climate change and automation. And I hope that these people can shape the world for the better with this intentional community, if they get the right input.
Oh, thank you, Marcy. And what do you know of their plans? What do you know of, because as I understand it, I mean, the guy doing it is a Goldman Sachs guy who's organizing it. The people who've invested in it are not, you know, I don't know that they're fluffy-hearted philanthropists merely. What do you know about either their objectives, plans, or how much they plan to rent, sell, how much they plan to donate, how much they plan to are willing to lose in order to keep things perpetually affordable, and or to invest in gray water solutions, et cetera? Do you know, are you hoping, are you advocating, or is there something that we already know that we should be aware of?
This is the first I've heard about that community, but I have long studied all aspects of sustainability.
Yeah.
And, you know, I hope to have good people in ad hoc committees and stuff that can guide them along towards that. Of course, billionaires seek more billions, but this is a legacy that's beyond money.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the wisdom, and I appreciate the call, Marcy, and thank you for taking the time, and thank you for being part of this, hopefully, intentional community. And I do think, and it's why I'm fascinated by this. I don't bring up the topic with anger, right? There's things to be angry about. There's things to be inspired about. I bring it up with curiosity and humility, and some definite concerns which have been shared by the local residents. I do think it's an interesting thing to consider if we were going to build a city in 2025 or 2030 or 2040. How would we want to build that city? I already know that would be different than we would build it in 1940 or 1960. I know that. There's things we've learned. Anybody who's tried to develop in New York City has realized, geez, most of New York City's been built. And tearing stuff down takes a lot of carbon just to tear it down. Takes a lot of carbon just to replace what was there. That so much of built space has already been built. And if you had tabula rasa with what we know now, you do a lot of things differently. That's one of the things I'm fascinated by. I'm also fascinated by who gets to decide and what those decisions will be based on. And will that just become more sort of financial extraction, or it will become more sort of just of a linear economy, or it will be more of a circular economy? That stuff I think is fascinating. It's fascinating. But let me go to Tom at West St. Paul, Minnesota. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi. I have been thinking of the similarity of real estate investment trusts buying America right out from under us in the same way that the Russian oligarchs bought up the distributed commons of the Soviet Union. Libertarianism, as I've heard Thom Hartmann say, originated in a real estate organization of some sort back in the 40s, maybe. Anyway, the wealth of the nation back in the 1800s was like 90% agrarian, and it was pretty much all in the hands of the people. And when we came up with a really great idea, any one of us could bet the farm on it, and little by little, that's kind of slipping away from us. And I think it's something we really got to watch out for. The more communities are owned by absentee owners, it messes around with voter registration. I mean, renters likely aren't as often renewing their voter registration as they should be. At any rate, that's about all I have to say. But
no, I appreciate it.
I'm glad to get that comment in.
No, thank you so much. And the very first thing you said, the libertarian stuff, and thank you for that. That's another angle. As I said, in this one county, it's like all the stuff's in there. How are you going to rebuild a place? How are you going to make a place? How should places be made? All the stuff's in there, and here's one of them. That under the auspices of freedom come proposals that are the opposite of it. if under the auspices of, hey, let the rich people just buy the stuff and make the decisions, and then they own the place and they make the decisions for that place, is that freedom? Or is it literally the opposite of it? Is it literally, is that form of government where, I don't know, let's call him a king, owns the land, owns all the land, and then people get to farm on it and fief on it and reside upon it at the king's pleasure and paying rents to the king? That, by the way, is literally why we fought a revolution. That literally the arc of history, bending towards justice, was because that was the wrong idea. And when people are saying freedom, and what they actually mean is freedom for capital, freedom for wealth, what they mean is precisely the opposite of freedom. What they mean is power for capital, power for wealth, in order to undermine, eliminate, obviate, get rid of, I could do more synonyms, actual freedoms of actual human beings. Freedom of capital is not freedom. Freedom of human beings is freedom. Freedom to choose is freedom. A woman's right to choose is freedom. Freedom to move around and go places, that's freedom. Freedom to actually speak is freedom. Weaponized freedom of speech, that is to be able to control and dominate the mechanisms of communication and the mechanisms of election, that's power. It's not freedom. That's one of the big, big lies. What are the two big lies? Here are the two big lies. One of the big lies, the 20th century, the big lie of the 20th century, was that the sum of the self-interest yields the public interest. It's not true, never was. The big lie this century started last century. The big lie this century is that the definition of freedom should be power. And what we mean by power, we should disguise as and call freedom. We're talking about, oh, well, give them the freedom to buy all the stuff and control all the things. No, it's not. It's power. It's handing over power to capital. That's what's going on. Those are the big lies. So in this little thing is big, big stuff. We'll do speed round to get to your calls. In the third hour, I do want to talk more about Project 2025. It's big, big stuff. We're getting to big stuff today. This is a big, big show. Talking about big, big stuff. And I'm fine with it. I'm fine with you and appreciate you. 202-808-9925. Speed round coming up.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. I am Jefferson Smith. Are you fine with it? Vanessa, you're on Speed Round from North Hollywood.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to go back to this annoying topic of daylight savings because it sounds like you come off sounding like, I'm just saying you sound like a privileged male in this.
Oh, yes, for sure.
I want to know if you grew up with female teenagers.
Oh, this is interesting. No, I did not.
Okay. When you reach 13, as a female, your hormones just go nuts. Yeah. They make you crazy, and it can last a long time.
Yeah.
And it throws off balance. It throws off digestion. Oh, boy, does it. It throws off response time. And just about every system, you spend the next 2 weeks recovering from that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know who's getting wealthy off of people counting on having to be out of whack for 2 weeks.
But you're saying
twice a year
to connect the dots. I think what I hear you saying is particularly for early teenage young women that daylight savings time switches are particularly disruptive.
And it gets repeated on into your, the rest of your life. You can count on being out of whack for 2 weeks twice a year.
No, I hear it.
And
Vanessa, I should say something else. I'm also fine with people who aren't fine with it. Like I am not an ideologue on the subject. I'm obviously mildly amused by it. But do you prefer standard time, or do you prefer so everybody gets up earlier, or they don't get up earlier, but it gets dark early, or do you like moving, or do you like when my dad just moved the whole thing? So yes, one time, but move it to daylight savings time, move it a little bit later.
Yeah, I'm with your dad. It's like put it on one or the other and just leave it alone.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
And people's systems will adjust, and we won't have this extra angst twice a year. I mean, does any other civilized country do this?
I don't know. And I appreciate your call. And it is a perspective that my privileged and limited upbringing, although not as privileged as some might think.
You're in control of your time.
Oh,
when
no,
somebody else controls
barely.
your time, it makes a huge difference.
No, barely. To be clear, I mean, when it comes to time, it's a mess. Like it messes with me too. But I appreciate the perspective very much.
No, thank you.
All right, Vanessa, you have a great day. Tom from L.A. I think you win Most Patient Listener Award.
Hey, Jefferson. First off, we the people ultimately are the government, and we must never forget that. We need to get big money out of politics. We need to get all money and all lobbyists out of politics. What I wanted to say, and I want to get your thoughts on this. All right, there's something I call, it's called, CHTR, and it stands for child care, taxes. I'm sorry, child care, health care, taxes, and rent or mortgage. And each of those things costs $16,000 a year. So that's $64,000 a year. The question we should be asking our politicians is, how is a person supposed to make it on $64,000 a year, a household of two people with kids? How are they supposed to make it when they haven't even paid for their food yet, they haven't paid for their clothing yet, or anything like that?
So send us your numbers. Send us your numbers. There's no question that figuring out how the economy actually works for human beings is tied to the most important thing we got to figure out. But send me your numbers.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
This is Thom Hartmann Show. This is Speed Round. Let's go straight to Pearson from Lamarck. Go ahead.
And once Cenk Uygur says all he has to say, America will be on board.
You're cutting out, Pearson. Just so you know, you're cutting out a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
I heard that. Okay. But yeah, finish your thought.
Once Biden introduces Cenk Uygur to America and Cenk Uygur becomes familiar with Cenk Uygur over the next few months, they will be on board with both Cenk Uygur and the administration round 2.
All right. Well, Pearson, I appreciate the call very much. Appreciate being part of the community. And I will say there was a little bit of a connection problem. I think on your end, I think what I heard you say is what you want Biden to do is, and forgive me if I'm mischaracterizing, but I think what I heard you say is you want Biden to nominate an unapologetically, courageously progressive cabinet, or at least maybe some specific members of that cabinet. And I think that's part of what needs to happen. I think we have a pre-primary coalition form of government. Right? Europe has a post-election form of coalition government, right? You win by your parties and you figure out which parties get together to form a government. Here we need to do that before the primary, and that part of that process has to make sure that there are cabinet members that reflect the values of the party that you're hoping will govern in order to garner that support. Catherine from Vancouver, we're on Speed Round. Oh, got some interference, but you're on the air. Catherine from Vancouver.
Oh, hello. I wanted to talk about the neurological problems that could happen as a result of changing the times and having to endure living with a time change. And especially, as Vanessa said, she talked about young women.
Yep.
Well, I want to talk about older women, menopausal women who have to endure the brutalizing time change.
I appreciate this perspective. I appreciate this perspective. We have this show in order to learn things. I learn things all the time, and on the show, every time I do it, it's one of my most important reasons I do it. And thank you for calling with that perspective. Do you prefer going to standard, or do you prefer our previous caller and my dad's viewpoint, which is that go all later? One, just keep it.
Just one or the other. Don't change it at all.
All right.
I'm out walking.
I'm fine with it.
Thom Hartmann's book, Walking Your Blues Away, has helped me immensely.
Nice.
And I walk a minimum of 7 miles a day.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's go to Joy from Colorado.
Hello, Jefferson. Lovely to talk with you again.
Likewise.
I wanted to talk about time zones a little bit.
You got 30 seconds?
Okay. Time zones began because of the railroads, because they had to have standard times.
Yeah.
So there are 4 time zones. But what I think we need to do is each have a national referendum, and each state gets to choose whether they want to be on standard time or savings time, and then each state, and then that becomes the standard.
All right. Joy, I appreciate the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Is corporate ethics and...
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Back at the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Point to Point Navigation, a memoir by Gore Vidal. This is from the last 2 chapters, and we're reading from page 258. In 1961, a new president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was inaugurated at the age of 43. With him, a new generation had taken the crown from the older generation as represented by General Eisenhower. There was triumphant talk of a new frontier, presumably to be crossed by all of us into a bright new land where the only shadow that marred the prospect was that of the hideous, murderous specter of international communism centered upon the Soviet Union, against whom JFK had sworn to bear any burden to ensure the ultimate victory of freedom, liberty, and so on. But early on, starting in 1959, under the general direction of then Vice President Richard Nixon, who had many interesting Cuban mob connections. Yes, Bibi Rebozo, his mysterious friend, was also linked not only to mobsters, but to the Cuban dictator Batista, who had been overthrown by Fidel Castro, to the annoyance of the mob, an annoyance that turned to fury when Castro shut down, if only briefly, the mafia-run Havana casinos. Elements of the CIA were soon attempting to murder Castro, who, like all Nixon enemies, was, if not yet a communist, worst, a communist dupe. The presidential election of 1960 was a close one, fought by Nixon and John Kennedy, an attractive Massachusetts senator whose father had, ironically, dealings with many mobsters during the pre-World War II period, as well as at the time of the prohibition of alcohol. The late film producer Ray Stark told me how during the short presidency of JFK, Joe Kennedy and Frank Costello, the retired New York mob overlord, would often have dinner at Kennedy's Central Park South apartment and rehash old crimes, often in the country of a retired teamster who gave great massages. Joe's mob connections were useful to Jack in the 1960 election and could easily have saved JFK's life in 1963 had Bobby Kennedy, in the interest of building himself up in the public eyes, not started arresting important mobsters, particularly in the so-called Appalachian Mob Conference, BUST, where they had all come together to confer about the secession of the leadership of the New York mob. I've long since forgotten how I first heard of the plot to kill JFK, while I had no idea at all of the Kennedy brothers' plot to kill Castro on December 1st, 1963, until I read a recent book by Lamar Waldron and Thom Hartmann called Ultimate Sacrifice. It was assumed that the Cuban Missile Crisis of '62 had sufficiently alarmed JFK and Castro's mentor Khrushchev so that they jointly backed down, putting an end, so everyone thought, to such dangerous adventures. JFK had pledged not to invade Cuba if Castro would allow inspections of any remaining missiles on the island. Since Castro did not cooperate, JFK then regarded his pledge as inoperative. In the spring of 1963, according to Ultimate Sacrifice, more a literal than an ironic title, John and Robert Kennedy started laying the groundwork for a coup against Fidel Castro that would eventually be set for what they called C-Day, December 1st, 1963. Bobby, like Nixon before him, was in charge of what would be the most secretive operation of its sort in our history. Since the CIA had, in the eyes of the Kennedys, botched the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion, the Department of Defense was to be in charge of this adventure, which would first engage mob hitmen to assassinate Castro and then replace Castro with a provisional government that would implore the United States to come to its aid and restore order. Ours is a society riddled with plots of every kind, from, let's say, one to bribe certain members of Congress to cheat Indians off of their casino money, to the financing, often secretly, of numerous presidential elections, while simultaneously great companies like Enron cheat customers, stockholders, and employees. Yet everyone who draws attention to all of this corruption is quickly denounced as a conspiracy theorist who means to undo the great fiction that anything truly wicked, at least in the murder line, must be the work of a solitary lone nut who is simply evil. Hence the setting up of Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone crazed killer of JFK, despite his own brief but presumably accurate statement after his Dallas arrest, "I'm the patsy." Then, as planned, his being gunned down by Jack Ruby, a fellow CIA asset. Oswald as lone killer for no reason at all, and addled Ruby, a one-time Chicago mobster who claimed to be deeply worried about the stress all this must be causing the widow Kennedy. And he goes on in chapter 55. Ultimate Sacrifice describes how the Kennedy C-Day plan was penetrated by three mafia godfathers: Carlos Marcello, New Orleans; Santo Trafficante, Tampa, Florida; and Johnny Roselli out of Chicago. All three were being vigorously pursued by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, along with a dozen other associates, of whom 6 were also working on the Castro murder case. The crime bosses then used parts of the C-Plan, a.k.a. AM World, to arrange JFK's assassination in a way that would prevent a thorough government investigation in order to protect the coup plan, its participants, as well as, naturally, national security by invoking the secrecy surrounding the C-Plan. The mob bosses targeted JFK twice before Dallas, once in Chicago on November 2nd, JFK called off his motorcade, and then in Tampa on November 18th. He survived unscathed. Ultimate Sacrifice reveals and details why Robert Kennedy later told several close associates the name of the godfather, Carlos Marcello, who had ordered his brother killed. But he couldn't do anything about it for fear the Soviets might go to war. Ironic and tragic action. I recalled when over the years I'd asked why what happened at Dallas happened, I'd answer, because Bobby had broken a truce made with the mob by Joe Kennedy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We are back. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be with you. This is the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Jefferson Smith. It's daylight savings time. By the way, one thing to note that people like to sound smart. We all do. I do. Sometimes I like to sound dumb. Sometimes I don't have the choice between the two. And when they want to sound smart, very often they'll do like the PST, right? Like Pacific Standard Time, or MST, Mountain Standard Time. You can continue to do it, CST, EST. And they'll put like, oh, let's schedule our time for, noon EST for people who have to do business or do work across time zones. Challenge is that they'll do this also during daylight time. So just know that if you do the PST or the EST, when it is the flip of that, and when it in fact is daylight time, you should be doing PDT or EDT. But since nobody does PDT or EDT, that I just write it out. I just write Pacific time, Eastern time. Just so someone who's a nudge, like me, someone who is like looking at it and say, hey, you're trying to sound smart, but you got it wrong, I can just avoid the issue. Also then, I don't need to remember exactly which one is which. I just have to make sure that I look at my automated time to know exactly what time it is and share the annoyance with everybody else when the time changes. Speed round, let's go to your calls. But one thing I do want to get into this hour is this Project 25 and this related Agenda 47. Is this effort not only to win the presidency, win Congress, and win the Supreme Court, but and win state legislatures, but to have and foment a Christian fundamentalist movement to own and occupy all of the levers of power in the United States, from media to corporations, all the pillars, right? All the pillars, got to control all the pillars. And one of those pillars includes the entire federal bureaucratic apparatus. So how food is regulated, how communications are regulated, how mergers and acquisitions are managed, controlled or not. And that this effort, not just talking about like which presidential candidate is older, not just talking about what they did previously or didn't do previously. By the way, Biden's record is outstandingly better than Trump's. But also what they will do. Because that's ultimately what the decision is. It's not only an award, is it a choice based on what we want the country to do? And do we want the country to move into a Christian fundamentalist direction? I don't mean to support Christian teachings or not. I don't mean that. I mean whether we should be a fundamentalist theocracy and whether that should control the levers of federal government and state government, et cetera. So I do want to talk about that, but I want to get to your calls right away because people like Jason have been waiting patiently. Jason from 9 Mile Falls, Washington, you win the Most Patient Listener Award.
Thank you, Jefferson. I'm 100% disabled veteran. And I'll go on ahead and say it. I am a victim of MST. I suffer from a bad back, but especially I suffer from PTSD. If you don't know what MST is, that's military sexual trauma.
I didn't know what that was. Thank you.
You're talking about Project 2025. One of the things that is specifically listed in there is that it says the next administration should explore how reviews could be accelerated, clearance from OMB to target significant cost savings from revising disability rating awards for future claimants while preserving them fully or partially for existing claimants. That follows along with the RSC, the Republican Select Committee. If you look into that for their 2023-2024 budget, they want to review disability people like me every 5 to 10 years. Now,
and review for purposes of if they can get a board to say, hey,
reevaluating.
you don't need, you're no longer a victim of MST, or it's no longer impacting your life to a degree that you should be getting your benefits.
Correct.
Yeah.
Veterans out there, disabled veterans, need to understand what they're trying to do. The RSC, they want to take, if you make over $170,000, they want to completely take away your disability payments.
Yeah.
And if you're 100% disabled, like myself, then they want to take away your Social Security. This stuff is real.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do, can you imagine the soldiers in the 20-year war who have been blown up, suffering from a different type of PTSD, that they have to also revisit that trauma.
Yeah.
I tried to kill myself a couple of years ago because I couldn't take it anymore.
Oh dear, I am so sorry, Jason. And I will say just two things. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for the call. And I have little wisdom to offer, but I'll just say two things. First of all, I'm terribly sorry, and not just the pabulum of thank you for your service, but I'm sorry for the impacts of that. And the second is thank you. Thank you for sounding the alarm and to raising awareness that that when the MAGA folks go after trans people, or when they try to vilify people crossing the border, that they are doing that in significant part to distract. And it's to distract so people won't look at what actually Project 2025 will do, what will actually, the risks it will actually pose. It'd be one thing to say, well, let's reevaluate, because then we can use resources to better help other veterans, or better help other people who've served in other ways, or to better marshal those public resources. If they weren't at the same time mostly trying to do it in giveaways to the most upper wealth brackets, not just income brackets, wealth brackets. So I am both sorry and I thank you. From Hawaii, Teresa, thank you for calling.
Hi, how you doing? It's my first time talking to you, Jeffrey, and I'm really, it's my pleasure talking to you, really.
Likewise.
So I just wanted to let you know, besides the Project 2025, there's this his draconian second-term plans called Agenda 47.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to know that because it was a reply to my response in Instagram, and I looked it up and I'm like, holy camole. Yeah, so it's something to look. Everybody should look into also. Besides 2025, it shows little clips, and it's a certified website under his name. So, yeah. So, just wanted to let you know about that, and just a little thing about the time thing. I call our time Hawaii Standard Time.
Hawaii is timeless. Anytime you go to Hawaii, the weather's always perfect. Unless you're on the west side.
Exactly.
And it's Hawaii is just perfect.
Yeah.
My dad.
I just wanted to let you know about Agenda 47. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My dad grew up in Hawaii.
Okay.
And so did most of my family.
Great.
Yeah, small world.
Okay.
But no, I appreciate it. Agenda 47. People can check it out. Associated Press did a good story on it, and it's worth looking into just to understand actually what they would do. Not only the talking points, but the real talking points they're actually saying to their supporters. All right. Let's go to Peter in Washington. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, Jefferson. A pleasure.
Likewise.
Pertaining to the time change, where have all the mathematicians gone? It just seems so simple that it's just over their heads. Why can't we compromise? Why can't
what would the compromise be? Half an hour?
Splitting the difference.
We just change it by half an hour.
You exactly got it.
Is that what you think? We should change it by half an hour?
Yeah, we give it half an hour to daylight savings, and we give it half an hour to standard time.
Yeah, no, just do it. Just it's not quite as disruptive. Not, for people who are concerned about sort of chemical disruption within their own bodies, it's only half as disruptive. I'm fine with it. I think it'd be fine. What do I know? I appreciate very much the call. Let's go to break. When I come out of break, I do want to...
How can it not work?
No, Peter, thank you so much. Peter, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to break. When we come back from break, I do want to play a clip, just a quick supercut about what Donald Trump actually wants to do with Social Security, et cetera. We'll be right back. I'm Jeff Smith. I just pushed the button for the first time. Normally they push the button for me, and they don't even give me any control. But then Sean told me where the button was today, and I still couldn't find it. I thought, what was the button? It's actually just a screw, and I've been pushing it like mad, and it didn't do anything. It's just a screw. Turns out the button's a little bit to the left of that. I just pushed it. Big day in the Bender family.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program, 202-808-9925. What'll actually happen based on the election? Judy from Pennsylvania, one of the most important swing states in the coming election. What have you?
Well, I was going to talk about the time change as well as democracy. I'm like you. I don't care. I think it doesn't bother me at all. And I'm a 78-year-old woman. It didn't bother me as a kid. Doesn't bother me now. Maybe I'm just an odd duck. I don't know. As far as being a woman, the lady that said being female. So, and the democracy thing, you know, I go back to what I always talk about, education. We really need to start young with our kids. We need them to understand. And when I was teaching sixth grade, I used to have this fun thing I did with the kids real quick. For party time, by the second semester, sixth grade, we had a class president, and I said, okay, you guys decide the party, and it always got into a mess. And they'd say to me, would you just decide? And I'd say, so it's dictator versus democracy. If I decide we're having broccoli and chips, if you decide you get that. And the kids got it. They got that democracy is hard. And we can't have democracy if people don't understand that. You have to work at it.
There you go. There you have to work at it. And this is, so the bad news, the Project 2025 people understand you got to work at it. The Koch brothers figure out you got to work at it. That
is so scary, that Project 2025. I've been reading a lot of excerpts. Frightening.
It's real scary. And the folks and the billionaires have been buying stuff in Solano County. They've been working at it for 7 years, but maybe not working at it enough. But what I want is for all of us to work on not only how we manipulate democracy, but how we actually make it work better and work better for more people. We got a minute and a half. Let's go to Dave from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, I've got a real quick one first. Ever since the 60s, throwing a newspaper, my argument on the daylight savings time thing is just move it a half an hour permanently.
Half an hour. You're part of the half. I did not know there were 4 options. I came in here thinking there were 3 teams in this debate. One was all standard. One was all daylight. That's my dad's. And then I'm fine with it. And the problem with I'm fine with it is I'm also fine with the others. Now we've got 2 callers that are for the half hour change. It's fascinating. Please complete your point.
Split the difference. It's all based off agreements from Meridian, which is zero latitude, and everything's numerical after that. The problem comes in that all the computers and everything, all your clocks that have the automatic update to standard time, all of a sudden now all those electronics and everything are all of a sudden real problematic. But I'm going to put a real quick bug in here for a gigantic topic, which is transmigration of souls. When does the soul enter the body?
Daylight savings time, half hour.
Boom.
I don't know. That's my best guess, man. I'm not.
No, transmigration of the soul, that's been a big argument in a philosophical of when does the soul actually enter the body. Now, these people, these would-be theologians, they have with absolutely no proof, no burning bush, no voice from heaven, no angels appearing, have decided the soul is entering the human body right at the moment of conception.
Yeah.
And the argument has been all the way traditional. It hasn't been for 2 years. And the whole idea of christening kids, of carrying on surnames, that was all a product of having nobility or having something that you passed on to your offspring. That the infant mortality was so great that you didn't even bother naming the child for 2 years because it was probably going to die.
No, if they were truly traditionalists, they would not advocate for the transmigration souls for at least half an hour after.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
We're back. This is Thom Hartmann's show. This is your show. I'm Jefferson Smith, your favorite substitute teacher, sitting in, honored to do it, thankful to be here. Let's go to Diane from Ann Arbor, Michigan, another one of the most important swing states in the Union. Our fate will be decided by what Diane does in Michigan. Go ahead, Diane.
That's a lot of pressure. What I want to talk about is I came across, it says a letter, and then it has quotation or a colon, Trump's Project 2025 Nazism. And they're saying that Trump's Project 2025 is a horror show straight out of Hitler's Mein Kampf. Yeah. And this was an editorial by Kyle Strutenberg from Sierra Vista in the Arizona Daily Star. Okay. And it's dated, let me get the date for you, January 11th, 2024. And back in 22, Trump was talking about camps, prison camps, concentration camps. I mean, and his wife, even Ivana, was talking how he was reading Mein Kampf, the only book she even saw him pick up. Wonder why she's suddenly gone. Maybe she had more to tell about him. But, yeah, it's just talking about...
No, I just found it. It says, Trump will order the military to round up millions of undocumented immigrants or others, putting them in prison camps, order military to suppress all peaceful demonstrations critical of him, use Justice Department retribution against his long list of enemies, replace experienced, educated federal civil servants with inept partisan loyalist cronies. These are their words, not mine. Suppress newspapers and network news agencies that broadcast critical news stories of him. And now a new one that he has said is free the December 6th, January 6th, excuse me. I've gotten the month wrong. I'm going to just change it to half an hour.
No, that's okay. I get you.
To free the January 6th insurrectionists. And that is not only a sop to his right-wing MAGA base, but it also means he would then have operatives that are willing to violate the rule of law, that are easy to network and identify and be his jackbooted brown shirts, right? It's scary stuff.
Christian nationalists. And did you read 6 where it says Trump will encourage armed right-wing extremist militia groups to use violence against his enemies? What do you think they've been stockpiling 400 million guns for? Yep. They're at the ready. And yep. I pray for anyone who is a person of color, because I pray for them. Yep. It scares me.
I appreciate the call. Charles of Vancouver, most patient listener award. Go ahead.
Jefferson, a pleasure. I really appreciate your perspective concerning daylight saving time. Doesn't matter either way to me. I just appreciate the early sunrises in the summer and the late sunsets. It's great for the spirit. Concerning these corporatized housing developments, across the bridge from Portland and Vancouver, the riverfront development is this amazing dollar development with $1 million condos and an 11-story retirement home where it costs the residents $7 or $8 grand a month to live there. Yeah. And right across 3 blocks away on the other side of the railroad tracks is the homeless encampment. And at the same time, today or yesterday, Vancouver announced the elimination of 250 to 300 jobs in the Vancouver school district, that somehow there's a budget shortfall of $30 million.
Yeah.
That's teacher and support staff. And I wonder, well, why didn't anybody see this coming? So on one side, there's this, amazing high dollar development going on that never existed in Vancouver before. And at the other times, we can't pay our teachers to even teach our kids. Frankly, I don't get it, Jefferson. Maybe you can shed perspective in some way.
No, and so what's the contrapositive? So while Vancouver is shedding teacher jobs, what's the other thing that's happening that's making you? I mean, budgets get hit and jobs get shed, and it sucks. What's the other thing going on that you're saying that's giving you the confusion?
I just it's just the priority of the city. There's development's great, but the homeless people just sweep them away and don't let the rich people see them. So.
No, it is. Our most important homeless policy can't just be hiding people.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Our most important homeless policy can't just be hiding people. We got to get deeper than that. This is Tom's Show. I'm Jeff Smith.
Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
From international trade policy to immigration policy to housing, we've got all kinds of topics. The wars between Republicans and Democrats, the Republican efforts to induce fascism in the United States. A great selection of opinions will be found over at HartmannReport.com. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
All right. Do we have the clip for, can we play the clip from our former president, the previous occupant of the White House? I think people remember his name. This is a little supercut that was put together of what I'm going to coin a term. I'm going to define that term after he says it. but I'm going to say the term now. It's not a dog whistle, it's a bird call. All right, and I want you to listen for the bird calls in this clip. Go ahead and play it if we could.
One last question.
Go ahead.
Entitlements ever be on your plate?
At some point they will be. We have tremendous growth. We're going to have tremendous growth. This next year, it'll be toward the end of the year. The growth is going to be incredible. And at the right time, we will take a look at that. You know, that's actually the easiest of all things, if you look. Because it's such a big
willing to do some of
If you don't cut something in entitlements, you'll never really deal with the debt.
We'll be cutting, but we're also going to have growth like you've never had before.
You changed your outlook on how to handle entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Mr. President? It seems like something has to be done, or else we're going to be stuck at 120% of debt to GDP forever.
So first of all, there is a lot you can do in terms of entitlements, in terms of cutting. And
one last question.
So, bird call. We know what a dog whistle is, right? A dog whistle was what Nixon did, and lots of people have done it. Trump does it too. But where you say something, you say states' rights. That's what Nixon's move, right? He said states' rights. And what he meant was, I'll let you do segregation or borderline segregation. I'll engage in a Southern strategy so that you can have overtly racist policies, but I won't say overtly racist things. I'll say a dog whistle that most people won't hear. That's what a dog whistle is, right? It's a whistle that's such a high-pitched sound that a human being doesn't hear it, the dog hears it. I'll say a word like states' rights, which at that time was loud and clear to Dixiecrats, was loud and clear to people in the South, but the rest of it just sort of washed over. Oh, states and rights. I like states and I like rights. That sounds okay. That's a dog whistle. Bird call is something else. Bird call you can hear. You just might not understand it. Bird call is actually pretty loud. It's trying to get attention. But you're hoping it doesn't translate so quickly you don't spread it. Donald Trump, and there's overlap, it's in the concepts, it's just useful to me to think about it. He's a dog whistler, he's also a bird caller. And that clip, when he says, yeah, we'll do some stuff to cut entitlements. Now, that is more transparent than a dog whistle, right? He's not like, all you have to do is define dog whistle, it's pretty clear. What are entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security in particular? And they have to, the people who really want, the Grover Norquist types who really want to shrink government to the size they can drown in the bottom of the bathtub, have to. The only way you can really impact the big federal budget, because 70% of the budget, Medicare, Medicaid, service and national debt, U.S. military, Social Security, that's 75%, roughly 3/4 of the federal budget, those 5 things, all right? So you can't just do it with like foreign aid and like welfare payments and stuff like that. You got to deal with those things. And U.S. military, he doesn't really want to go out and saying I want to cut the military, because there's still some McCain Republicans lingering around. Second, you can't just cut payments in the national debt. You'd like to cut the national debt, but you can't just cut payments in the national debt. So that leaves you with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. So the real anti-government types, the real anti-democracy types, the real anti-middle class types, those are different but overlapping things, have to address those things. Now, what they know is that seniors vote and watch Fox News, both things. And a lot of them are on Medicare, tend to all be, and tend to be on Social Security. So Donald Trump actually ran to the left when he ran for president the first time on policy. Said he was going to do something about campaign finance reform. He was going to go after hedge funds. Said he was going to preserve Social Security, Medicare. He said a bunch of things. Right, he was gonna increase taxation on people who weren't working for a living, on basically hedge fund types, all kinds of things like that. Trade, right? He was gonna ratchet down free trade agreements. He didn't govern that way. Now he's not even campaigning that way. Now he is saying it clearly, but kind of in a bird collie way. So you combine that with what Mike Lee had to say, the clip we played yesterday, with Mike Lee saying squarely, we got to pull out Social Security from the root. His line, not mine. They're saying the same thing. And we got to be aware what's actually happening in the next election. What the choice actually is whether we will preserve the basic social justice infrastructure of our country, the basic public structures that allow for middle class, that keep seniors from being the poorest demographic, as they were the poorest demographic before Social Security started, or they're going to try to make things a little bit better, or we're just going to let them get a lot worse. And I'm not fine with that. Speed round to wrap. Let's go to Phyllis from Pleasanton. What a nice sounding place.
Hello?
Go ahead. You're on the air.
Phyllis. I'm in favor of abolishing daylight savings time and going on to standard time for the whole country.
All right. Well, I appreciate that perspective. What's the temperature like in Pleasanton right now?
Temperature, about 65 or so.
Yeah, it's relatively pleasant. I appreciate the perspective, and thank you so much for listening. Let's go to Bob for San Jose. You're on Speed Round, Bob.
Yeah, I like the daylight time all year round. And,
there you go.
And FYI, if you want to read that Heritage Foundation thing, it's a PDF available free, and it's over 900 pages.
Yep.
Project 2025.
Yep.
And you can imagine that didn't happen in 5 minutes in terms of writing it, and it's going to take a long time to read it, and Lord only knows what's hidden in the middle of 900 pages.
Yeah, no, it's a tome. They've been working with patients, and it's another theme we actually haven't gotten into today, but it's got to be one of our underlying themes. If we're going to preserve democracy, we can't just be fine with it. If we're going to preserve democracy, give me a moment, just a moment, if you could, that if we're going to preserve democracy, that we can't, I mean, I've been sort of trying to amuse myself and maybe others by saying I'm fine with it on daylight savings time. When it comes to preserving democracy, we can't just be neutral. We can't just be, we have so much of what we currently enjoy as a country is a lagging indicator. It was based on activism and progressive work that was done during the New Deal and the Great Society. And we can't just rest upon those laurels because we are resting upon them so much. They are in danger of withering, and some of them have withered. And reading that, as you said, going to and checking out the comprehensive policy guide the Heritage Foundation came up with. Donald Trump didn't come up with that. He's the tip of the spear. He's just the rattler on the rattlesnake. And we've got to recognize that we need patience also. We need major commitment over time to rebuild and refresh and recommit to a system that's better for all of us, rather than that's better for fewer and fewer and fewer of us. Last word for you.
Well, the last thing I want to say is I learned a little bit more about this Agenda 47 thing, and that's got my hair standing straight on end.
Yeah, keep on spreading the word. That stuff is scary. It does not represent what a majority of the people in the country want. It would not be elected president if it were on the ballot. So thanks for bringing it up. John from San Francisco, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm wondering if Trump does, God forbid he gets reelected, and he goes about instituting his policy of deconstructing democracy. Yeah. Could there be any generals in our army that would overthrow this man? I mean, have incite a coup of some sort, where we reestablish a democratic norm in this country again.
I think if Trump is elected, then I think the generals will fall in line.
God!
If he is not, I do think the one thing I'd add is if there had been a further effort insurrection, there might have been some generals to stand up. But one of the challenges is that we have become so divided, and that culturally the military has been more of a thing that yes, a lot of people of color do, and yes, some lower middle class folks do, and a lot of rural people do, but it is not a representative sample. One thing, by moving away from a draft, is the military is not right now a representative sample of the country. They have been a real driver of small p progressive progress in a lot of ways, but we can't only rely on that on a coup's benefits on the military to protect us. I think we have to build civilian power, and then continue a system where the military does the bidding of civilian power. But I do appreciate you working on connecting dots. Let's go straight to Steve from Henderson, Nevada. Henderson, not too far away from Vegas, as I understand
it. Butts right up against it.
Yeah.
Hey, anyway, Jefferson, what I wanted to talk about is we just did this segment about entitlements and all that.
Yeah.
And I know Republicans are always going to use that term, entitlements. I would like to see Democrats actually push back on that terminology.
Yeah. What's the word you like?
and not use the word
earned benefits.
Anything but entitlements. Yes, earned benefits, citizenship benefits.
Earned benefits was
no
the
matter
best.
what you've done in,
I actually learned that phrase. I'm glad you brought it up because I'd forgotten. I learned that phrase, earned benefits, sitting in this chair on this program. One of the things I love about doing the show. But thank you for that reminder. I'm going to try to do a speed round to get people waiting so patiently. Like Jim from Santa Fe, you got 30 seconds?
Yeah, real quick, Jeff. Always enjoy you filling in for Tom, man. I wish I had you for a next-door neighbor. I chat with you all day about everything. But anyways, about this silly-ass time change thing. We should take a playbook out of Newfoundland. They have a half an hour difference between the rest of Canada, and the people there are very happy with it.
The half-hour crew. We made a new. I started the I'm Fine With It coalition. We now have the half-hour compromise coalition. It's just there's all kinds of innovation happening today. Dave from North Miami Beach, you have 30 seconds.
wow. I want to remind you, Monday was Douglas Adams' birthday, and people like Elon Musk misread his work that you should just get rid of 1/3 of people who are neither the doers nor the thinkers, forgetting the punchline that they wind up surviving the virus epidemic that they weren't around to fix. Gee, COVID anyone? Like hollowing out a pandemic team?
I appreciate the call.
People get in love with the tech, but they forget the social aspect of what makes the technology work. Otherwise, you have painkillers, and you're not killing the pain.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. We'll keep going.
Tech like Elon Musk, they forget the punchline. They still love the technology. Yeah. I love technology, but I'm a social studies teacher, so I see it differently.
So, social studies teacher, what age group?
I'm sorry, age group?
Yeah, you're a social studies teacher. You said what age? What
rather, that's my credential, so I should be teaching like middle school.
Got it.
But this is Florida, so if you're not somebody's daughter or daughter-in-law, good luck with that.
Yeah, and they've just eliminated any DEI efforts in schools in Florida, and the NAACP has called for athletes to choose schools other than Florida schools. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is the Thom Hartmann Show. Last round, 202-808-9925. 202-808-9925. Fill the room with your intelligence. CW, you're on the air.
Hey, Jefferson, good to see you again.
Likewise.
Listen, a couple of callers ago got my idea. I'm sick and tired of letting them get away with calling a Social Security entitlement.
Yeah.
All you got to do is look at your paycheck. You've paid that. So it's certainly not an entitlement. It's what and I guess you could call it earned benefits.
Earned benefit is the favorite phrase I've heard up to now, and I will always prefer a better phrase if someone's got one.
Right, and of course, that's not going to stop Fox News. But anyway, at least we can embarrass them. All right, that's all I got.
CW, thank you so much for listening. And where do you live, CW?
Elkin, North Carolina.
North Carolina was one of the most important states in the election coming up. That you are going to decide the future of the nation. So it's all on you, CW.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I hope we've been handed a gift by Robinson being elected. Let's just hope.
Say that again. By who being elected?
By the lieutenant governor being elected. Or well, not elected, but, going to be the nominee on the Republican side.
Yeah.
It's a shame what's happened to North Carolina in the past 10, 15 years, but hopefully we can straighten it out.
CW, thank you so much for listening, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, be well.
Appreciate it.
Terry from Astoria, you're on the air.
Hi, Jefferson. Yes, I was just wondering if a little humor could be appreciated. John Oliver, who is the host of Last Week Tonight on Sunday nights, has offered Clarence Thomas a contract. He's offered him $1 million per year and a $350,000 motor coach to simply retire. And the contract is good until the end of Clarence Thomas's or John Oliver's life.
It's it was done by a good writer's room when they came up with the motor coach, right? Because like I could come up with something like $1 million a year, right? We could do that off the cuff. Like if Clarence Thomas, he wants money, we'll give him the money right now, right? But it takes a good writer's room to say, plus a motor coach. Because then you could visualize he and his wife going around the country doing right-wing stuff, getting like nice vacations, driving around. And I don't know if he'd be the driver, she'd be the driver, if they'd hire a driver, they'd mix it up a little bit. Who knows? Who knows? Every half hour they'd switch like Newfoundland.
Driver.
Say that again?
With $1 million a year, they could easily hire a driver.
With $1 million a year, they could certainly afford a driver and even give him benefits. It's a pretty good gig. I don't know. It's pretty attractive. The challenge is we don't know that just started a bidding war. If Clarence Thomas could get that, who knows what the other side would want to pay to keep him there. But no, I appreciate it, Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How are we doing on time?
30 seconds.
I just asked that question. He said 30 seconds, which is also how long they have in Newfoundland for commercial breaks. For others, it's a minute or two. But in Newfoundland, they just compromise. They have it. Should we do no breaks or 1 minute breaks? They say we will have half a minute breaks. But no, I like it. I'm down. I wouldn't mind the half an hour. I'd be fine with it. I think my last choice. I do like getting the hour of sunlight in the winter. So I do think that of the things I'm fine with, I think I like my dad's view of keeping daylight time, right? Having that year round. And I also like the view of the caller that said, I guess what I characterized it, just giving us 25 hours a day. But just for people with whom I agree, I want them to get an extra hour. We'll figure that out. With your
Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically, just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
This is Thom Hartmann's show. I appreciate you. Let's go speed round our last calls and the big finish. Let's go to Michael from Anchorage, Alaska.
1 minute.
Right on. Thank you. First of all, we'll just do the pro and con. Okay. In the dictionary, pro and con are exactly opposites. So the opposite of progress would be Congress. Now, my question is, I can't remember what the difference between a state citizen and a federal citizen is in terms of your legal status within the state that you live in. I'll take my answer off the air if you can provide it. Thank you.
Well, what I've got to do is I've got to give Butch 15 seconds. Butch, you got 15 seconds before you wrap.
Yes. I say when you combine religion and politics, that is the ultimate corruption. That's just total corruption when you mix the two.
Butch, I appreciate the call very much. And that's a good place to wrap. Susan, we'll have to get to tomorrow. Thank you so much for calling in. And let me say thank you to all of our listeners today. And that's a decent call, maybe it's even a great call to end on. Because this idea, the term Christian nationalist, I don't know if it's a perfect word or not. Christian, a lot of people are those things. People also like the nation. The idea that fundamentalist views of one religion should rule a nation that was built on religious freedom, not establishment, that's un-American. All kinds of un-American stuff traveling under a false American flag. I appreciate you all so much. You're the coalition of the benevolently irrational, the good people doing good things for no good reason. And you are priceless. Definition of priceless, worth a lot, not for sale. With you, democracy is possible. I appreciate you. Be with you back tomorrow. This is Tom's Show. I'm Jefferson Smith. Be well.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.